Bonnar!
Stephan Bonnar was one of the most important figures ever to fight in UFC. He was a legend of the sport, and I have the honor of calling him my friend.
Honestly, my whole life, I was obsessed with being tough. Obsessed with the word tough. And that really became my purpose in life.
April 9th, 2005, the first ever Ultimate Fighter.
Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar get in there, and they just start going at it. Crazy fight.
Both of these guys, they're giving it everything they have. What an incredible war.
That changes the entire face of mixed martial arts.
The most significant fight in UFC history.
There is no loser in this fight, and we're going to offer Stephan Bonnar a six-figure contract with the UFC.
Stephan Bonnar has fought every single time the same way he did when he made history that night against Forrest Griffin. Nice knee, you heard him. Oh, it is over! The American Psycho!
It is my honor to induct you into the UFC Hall of Fame.
Thank you so much. I've spilled pints and pints of blood.
Plenty to celebrate. He had some amazing stories, and I was fortunate enough to be part of a few of them. And I guess I'll start here by telling a few of the cooler. It just made things more awkward. So I think it was Stephan who moved the curtain, and it just made things more awkward. So I think it was Stephan who moved the curtain, and so we started talking. And due to the fact that a Vegas ER on a Saturday night, being a little bit cut and needing some stitches is not a priority, we had time to learn each other's life stories. And then we decided that what we had to do was get for me, it was my best friend Roy, and for Stephan, it was his future wife Andrea, to go get us some fast food. So they did. Stephan, he went through a McDonald's phase. Some of you know that. It's unfortunate, but it happens to everyone. So they went and got us $20 worth of McDonald's, and in $20 in 2005 money would actually get you a substantially large amount of extremely mediocre food. So there we are, eating McDonald's burgers in the ER, and our next course of action, as you can imagine, was to figure out how to get some beers in there. Thanks to the inefficiency of the hospital system in Vegas and the popularity of the Vegas ER on a Saturday night, we got to know each other's life stories. He had grown up a martial artist, doing taekwondo and reading stories about Bruce Lee and practicing and studying his principles. I wasn't really that familiar with martial arts, and to me, martial arts was an old guy in pajamas trying to convince me to do weird things, so I wasn't huge on it, but he actually convinced me that martial arts was an art. It wasn't just about fighting, and that's one of the cool things that I really wanted to share with you, is that he was a martial artist. He studied these principles. I know he talked about being tough, but he thought that martial arts was the way to that. Now, he grew up with a couple older brothers that helped make him tough, so he didn't lack for toughness thanks to his older brothers. I grew up with a younger brother that played violin, so not a lot of toughness in our family. So the more we talked, the more I realized we were the yin and yang to each other. He was the exact same as me, but the complete opposite. And by the time the doctors got there to stitch us up, I'm pretty sure Stephan was looking through the cabinet seeing if he could find a needle and thread. And that's when I decided that every good fight after party should start in the ER. In case I didn't know Stephan enough, I really, really got to know him when we traveled to London to help casting for The Ultimate Fighter. Now, we thought that we were going to be talent scouts. We thought we'd moved up in the world. No, what we actually were going to do, later we found out, was roll with 40 hungry dudes that wanted to be on The Ultimate Fighter and show us, or show Dana through us by beating us up how tough they were. So we rolled with these guys for 3 hours. But the cool thing was that was the first time either of us had flown first class, and we got to fly next to Dana White, which is pretty cool. It's 2005 or 6, so that was big time. When we landed, I guess Stephan felt the need to get that first class energy off of him, and of course he decided that we had to find a British McDonald's that that it was some sort of exotic delicacy, which, you know, is a little weird, but you fly first class, you eat McDonald's, it evens out, I'm sure. A couple hours later, now this is like 3 in the morning, I text him. Well, this is 2005 or 6, so this is like before phones were magic and could, you know, entertain you. Hey, what's up? You know, are you up? And of course he was, and I guess my plan was that the two of us would wander around London in the middle of the night, and maybe if there were 2 of us, we wouldn't get mugged. So I get to his room, and he's doing what one does if they put a treadmill in your room. You know, hotel room treadmills are actually kind of a cool thing, but he's running on it naked. No shoes, no socks, completely naked running on it, which, you know, I said, Stephan, that's a little weird. Why are you doing that? But his answer is actually why I decided we were buds for life. He had taken a shower since the plane, so he'd taken his dirty plane clothes off, and he didn't want to put those back on. And then he only had budgeted enough underwear for 1 a day. So if he sweat in his underwear tonight, he wouldn't have any fresh for the flight back. And I said, oh my God, I also only brought a carry-on. That is amazing, buds for life. And I had, in all fairness to me, I brought 6 pair of underwear instead of the 5. Just, you never know when you might need an extra. The most recent Stephan adventure that I got to hear about and be a part of was last year when we were meant to be doing a seminar, and he starts texting me a little bit frantically about an hour before the seminar starts saying he's gonna be late. But then he shows up on time and kind of flustered. So before I can even ask, he starts telling me the story. He was selling funeral insurance at this time, and he was, as one does, selling funeral insurance in an assisted living community. And so he'd worked with his clients, he'd done his thing, and then they were closing down for the night, so he had to excuse himself, you know, for the long drive to the gym, and he goes in the bathroom. I'm guessing he was in there for a while, because when he comes out, it's dark, nobody's there, and he finds that he's been locked in. So he's going around, he's checking all the doors and windows, they're secure. And then he finds a number. This is like in case of emergencies, call. So he calls and he ends up connected to somebody in Connecticut or something. And I guess it was for non-urgent emergencies or something. So he checks the doors again and he finds the least secure door and breaks out of it. And in my head, I see Stephan, a big dude, breaking out of an assisted living home. And in my mind, like the residents, the elderly residents are like calling 911 or be like, this guy's breaking out. And then maybe they're thinking, well, he's breaking out, should I go too? I don't know. That was Stephan. But the seminar went great and he didn't get in trouble. In fact, the home apologized to him for locking him in. Now, Stephan was a loving husband and father, and he was a great friend who always had your back. He was larger than life with a big personality that filled up any room. He had a huge heart, and to watch him fight was to know him. Yes, he was tough and a little crazy, but he was fearless. He wasn't fearless, but he still made himself do those things. He made himself overcome his fear to show his toughness every time. And no matter who he fought, where he fought with every ounce of his being, heart and soul, and that was Stephan Bonnar. On behalf of Stephan's family and friends, I want to thank you all very much and leave you with this. Despite the moniker American Psycho, Stephan was an incredibly kind and loving person. Now, let me now introduce President of the UFC, Dana White. Thank you all.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to say thanks to everyone for coming today and everybody who's watching online. I want to thank Andrea, Griffin, and the Bonnar family for allowing us to do this celebration of life for Stephan. And I'm going to be brief today so you can hear from people who were very close to him and who will speak about Stephan, the man, better than I ever could. Forrest was awesome. That was incredible. Thank you, Forrest. But what I want to talk about today is Stephan the fighter and what he meant to the UFC and to the sport. Stephan Bonnar is one of the most important figures in the history of this company and mixed martial arts. That's why the Tough One finale between Stephan and Forrest is the first fight ever inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. And it's funny how things kind of play out. When I look back, I don't have all the crazy friendship stories that Forrest does, but that first season of The Ultimate Fighter was the longest season that we ever did. And, most of the guys that were in that house, Forrest included, Stephan included, were a little nutty. And the longer they were in there, the nuttier they got. There were so many different things that happened that season, but when you look at the way life plays out and the way that things happen, it's crazy, because at one point, Stephan went in and told the producers that he was going to take a shower. He snuck out the window. Now remember, you're talking back in, this is 2005, 2004, 2005-ish. The house that they were in was in the middle of the desert. It was in the middle of nowhere. Stephan sneaks out the window of the bathroom to go look for booze, because we took booze out of the house because these guys were acting like idiots in there, and we finally had to take the liquor out. And he disappears, and he's gone for hours. They can't find him. And when we finally do bring him back, everybody's saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to kick him out? Are you going to kick him out? And for whatever reason, I did not kick him out of the house, thank God, or probably wouldn't be up here talking today. But in late 2004, we started filming The Ultimate Fighter. The UFC was obviously in pretty rough shape. Frank Lorenzo and I were producing the reality show as a last-ditch effort to turn things around. But in the early stages of filming, this thing was so crazy. We didn't even know if season 1 was going to air. We had no clue. It was a very weird time for the UFC. But obviously, Tough Season 1 did air on Spike TV in early 2005, and the ratings were incredible. But a successful reality show wasn't going to be enough to pull us out of the hole that we were in. What we needed to do was build stars, and what we really needed was a great finale. It was the first live UFC fight on free TV, and it was either going to make us or break us. And no disrespect to the cast of Tough One. I know some of you are here, but not a lot of those fights were great. They weren't the best fights in the world. There was only one fight on that card that changed the course of history: Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar. And the card that night never really showcased the back and forth battle and the grit and really what this sport is all about. Then Stephan and Forrest stepped into the octagon and went to war for 3 unbelievable rounds. The people in the arena, if any of you were there that night, and remember, you heard it at the end of the video too, they were stomping their feet. It sounded like a freight train was going through the place, and everybody was chanting, one more round, one more round. And the ratings went through the roof. And what was awesome that night was that both of these guys showed skill, incredible toughness, but more importantly, they were both so passionate and wanted to win so bad, they showed the largest audience we'd ever had what this sport was really all about. And obviously, Forrest won a close decision, but like I said in the octagon that night, there was no loser in that fight, because Stephan was equally responsible for how great the fight was, so we ended up giving him a contract too. And that night, there was much more on the line than just winning a reality show or a UFC contract. Literally, the future of the entire sport was at stake. Stephan and Forrest rose to the occasion and gave the performance of a lifetime. And they did it right when we needed it the most. They saved the sport, and we will never forget what they did that night. Obviously, Stephan went on to fight in the UFC for many more years, fought some of the greatest fighters of all time: Anderson Silva, Mark Coleman, Rashad Evans, and the GOAT, John Jones. Stephan loved to fight and compete. He was always ready, willing, and able to face anyone, anytime. The fans loved him because he was incredibly entertaining, and he was so tough, and Stephan Bonnar was a real fighter. Stephan was everything the UFC stands for. His contributions to this company will never be forgotten, and he will be greatly missed by all of us. And for Andrea and her family, the UFC will always be your home. Anything you ever need from me or anybody in this company, do not ever hesitate to ask. We're here for you, for whatever you need. Remember that. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much. You're a man of your word. You always promise a spot for Stephan Bonnar, and it's a tribute to what he did for this sport that you put this together. So thank you. I'm Tom Scully. I'm a lifelong best friend of Stephan Bonnar. I met Stephan when we were 3 years old. I'm pretty sure this was my first day of preschool. Our paths had crossed on the teeter-totter. He asked me to join him for a ride, and before I could get on my side, another one of the older kids jumped in my way. Stephan wouldn't have it, and took the kid and threw him off the teeter-totter, followed up with a swift kick, and the rest is kind of history. It was my first time at the principal's office, and it was my first time meeting a real-life superhero. So, yeah, Stephan was gifted. He was a precocious student of his many interests. And that was all things being tough. It really was a real big part of Stephan's character. He loved to be tough. And this is in part because of the family and his upbringing. His father was a Marine. His uncle was a boxing champ. His brother Brent was the toughest kid in school, and he was really tough. And then Johnny was a fantastic athlete and musician. And growing up, Stephan wanted to be a ninja, which, that's kind of a little difficult for parents and teachers and coaches to kind of guide him through that. But nonetheless, I think that we could all offer our thanks to Mrs. Bonnar, who drove him to Taekwondo for many years on pursuit of his black belt and making him those special green drinks. So thank you, Mrs. Bonnar. Stephan saw discipline as the foundation of his toughness. He never missed a workout, no matter what. He always ate on a schedule. Even after an especially rough night out in Iceland, he got a workout in. And I remember he came afterwards and he was bragging. He was so proud of himself for putting the treadmill up to 8.5. Now, Stephan knew damn well that was in kilometers, but that was his personality. He had a great sense of humor, and it was always meant to entertain himself. And he did this with deadpan delivery. Stephan's theory of this discipline involved breaking things to better understand the parts. He loved mixed martial arts, incorporating boxing and wrestling, jiu-jitsu. He sought to make his reactions beyond thought into instinct. He was a black belt at 15. He wrestled. He's a lifelong student. He absorbed great experience from legends like Sergio Pena and Carlson Gracie. Carlson Gracie was renowned for his toughness, coached and cornered Stephan during that legendary fight with Forrest. And his advice in between rounds had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. It was, Robocop, no take you down, the punchy, porra. It was all about the fight. He wanted to see a good fight, and he got one. He called him Robocop because no matter what you threw at him, he kept on coming. So these are the words of Stephan and how he described that moment and how he felt about the UFC and his opportunity. He said, it wasn't Forrest and my athleticism that changed the face of this sport. It was our enduring spirit. The option of quitting is always right around the corner, but laying down and covering up to me is death. People fell in love with that fight because it reminded them of how much fight they have inside themselves. That fight touched certain emotions in nearly everyone who watched it. The UFC was no longer a guilty pleasure, but instead something they were proud to be an advocate for. The UFC no longer meant human cockfighting. It meant perseverance, humility, respect, and honor. I want to keep touching these emotions and make fans feel like they're part of this. I want people to laugh. I want people to lighten things up and bring loyal fans in from a very young age, thus helping to create a brand for life. I care too much about all these things to stand around and wait and watch and hope. Stephan was a two-time Golden Gloves champ. His favorite boxer was Aaron Pryor. He loved that wham, bam, don't give a damn style. His favorite fighter was Sakuraba, legendary wars. Never quit, no surrender. Stephan was a great friend. We did a lot of things together through our lives. We worked many jobs as kids. We were teamsters. We loaded trucks in the cold Chicago winters at midnight. We sold beers together at Grateful Dead concerts while we were still in high school. And we sold t-shirts to fans on 4 continents. Stephan always had my back. One of the t-shirts we created wound us up in a little bit of hot water for using a fighter's likeness as a Cabbage Patch Kid on a t-shirt. We were sued, and as part of the settlement, there was a public apology. So Stephan, not to be outdone, he challenged one of the plaintiff's team members and issued the public apology live during his victorious post-fight interview speech. Stephan always had my back, and he was a great guy. He was loyal. He remained with his wife for 22 years. He even pulled a Rocky Balboa moment shouting, "I love you, Andrea," at the season finale of Tough One. Stephan was not one to hold a grudge. He never spoke of being robbed or cheated. He had a quiet acceptance of what is. Stephan had tremendous respect for the abilities of his adversaries, people who he'd later call friends. Stephan named his son Stephan Bonnar, and Stephan loved his son very much. Stephan was admired by those who possessed greatness themselves. I saw Roger Clemens jump a security line to get a picture with Stephan and invite him to deliver speeches to inspire others. At the premiere of I Am Bruce Lee, someone Stephan modeled himself after and the movie he was in. One of Stephan's many fans came up and told him how that fight with Forrest had inspired him and caused him and gave him the strength to dig deep. Stephan thanked him, saying, "That means a lot, especially coming from you, Robert Downey Jr." Stephan lived an exceptional life. He never gave up. He fought until the very end. He believed you can never fail if you don't quit. He packed many lives into his short time here on earth. He had an expectation of greatness, and he lived it. He fought the toughest men on the planet. He starred in movies. He did stunts. He ran the Baja 1000. He performed stand-up comedy. He did color commentary for legendary fights. He trained with elite forces in counterterrorism techniques and was one hell of a marksman. Stephan started a charity in support of the inclusion of special needs athletes competing in martial arts. He even held the Dana White lookalike contest and hosted a game show entitled, "Are You Smarter Than a Ring Girl?" Stephan was a lot more than a fighter. I'll finish with a quote that Stephan shared during his Hall of Fame induction speech. "Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is filled with educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, 'Press On,' has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. I'll forever miss my friend, the legend, Stephan Bonnar." It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Bonnar.
Thank you all for coming. Thank the UFC for putting on this celebration. Thank Dana White. Hearing these stories are bittersweet. We certainly will miss him. Stephan was a huge Hoosier. He was the first kid we had that was born in Indiana, and it showed. He was more country than city. He had a problem, though. We were always at the Hammond Clinic. He was just, before he could walk, he broke his leg. I don't know how, but Yeah, so he'd crawl around dragging that leg behind him. But he'd never cry, never say anything. It's just, we'd look at him and say, you know, something's wrong with him. So we'd take him to the clinic. Usually it was a Sunday or a holiday. And sure enough, broken leg. When he broke his arm, we didn't know till we seen him riding his big wheel with one arm dragging all day. And said, man, maybe we better take him. Yeah, it was broke. He was the doctor we had growing up with the kids, Dr. Morris, said he'd never seen a kid more than he saw Stephan. He's seen him all the time. And by the way, we know him when he used to go by Stephen. He was, when he was in grammar school, he decided that he didn't like being called Stephan. He wanted to be Steve. And he'd constantly remind us. And then when he got into show business, he kind of liked Stephan. So we always had to be careful about that. So, but he had a tendency to get hurt. The only advice I gave him was to get to know Stitch real well, because you'd probably be seeing him a lot. And he did. He was good friends. So he went to, you met one of his classmates. There's more here today. He tended to be loyal to his friends and to his family. He sort of got into, Taekwondo first and wrestling, because being the youngest, as Forrest and Tom mentioned, he used to, his brothers they were kind of rough on him. And he decided he was going to do something about it. So he did. But he was always skinny. He was always tall, skinny. And at school, a lot of people would look at him and they didn't think much of him. So they'd take him on. He fought all the time. He loved it. He loved to fight. He got into, we didn't know any of this stuff, but he was working summers on the docks, like Tom was saying. And unbeknownst to us, he was driving up to Chicago to Carlson Gracie's gym and learning jiu-jitsu. He already had a black belt in Taekwondo, and he was learning the box with Joe Kane. Joe Kane, an interesting character. But he entered the Golden Gloves. Now, when I was a kid in Chicago, Golden Gloves was a big deal. It was at St. Andrew's Gym up by Wrigleyville. And the toughest kids in your high school went up there, toughest kids in Chicago. And he was actually boxing up there. So we go to the fights, there'd be 18, 19 fights. He'd be there all night. But we'd go watch him fight, and it was always the same with Stephan. He'd lose that first round usually. And then by the time the first round ended, he knew he had him. The second round, he'd start coming on. And then by the third round, the other fighter would be so gassed from hitting him earlier on that he'd just wipe him up. And he won. And we were amazed. We said, what? This is our kid. We didn't see that coming. And he even went to the Nationals. The second year, first year he won the rookie division, but second year he actually went to the Nationals, and we didn't bother going because he was going to one fight. He was coming back home, but sure enough, he won first couple fights, beat a kid from New York that was favored, and the kid he finally lost to from St. Louis was the runner-up heavyweight. So he always was surprising us. Much like when he got on this TV show with the UFC. We didn't expect nothing out of that. But once again, he surprised us. Stephan had a love for the sport. He loved fighting, and it showed. He loved the UFC. He loved his fellow fighters. He loved his family. He loved his cousins. When there was any kind of wedding, no matter where he was, he'd always show up. When there was family reunions, he always showed up. And he loved his family, and they loved him. And just as so many of you loved him. So I want to thank you all for coming out. This is really blows my mind. It's amazing. And like you, we will miss him dearly. And life will go on, but it just won't be quite the same. Thank you. And now I believe the cast of the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 are here and are going to be coming up next.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chris, and Stephan was my friend. You guys know that he was a warrior and an amazing fighter, a true martial artist. You know all that. Stephan and I shared a bunk bed on that first season of The Ultimate Fighter, so I got to know him pretty good. We shared a lot of stories through our career. We fought on the same card many times and had a lot of great nights together. There's so much I could tell you. There's a lot of stories that are also not PG, I could tell you. Some good times being young, traveling the world, and fighting memories with Stephan. We stayed in touch all those years. It was just a couple years ago, Stephan, maybe 2 years, Stephan was doing some commentary in San Diego. He came out, he stayed at my house, we went hiking, we went out to dinner, and we talked. And, what I remember about that, and the one thing always about Stephan that I can appreciate more than anything is he was gonna tell you how it was, There was always humor mixed in to his answer, to his delivery. But he was going to let you know how he felt, whether it was something I was going through, something he was going through. Stephan Bonnar was not just in this industry, but I think in the world, one of the most honest people I've ever met. He was a good friend, and just want to pay my condolences to his wife, his son, his family, and say that, his legend and what he did, he lived many lives. This guy, full lives, accomplished so much, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Karalexis, and it's quite an honor to be here today. Thank you to the UFC and Dana for making this happen, and the Bonnar family for letting us celebrate Stephan's life. There's a lot of amazing things that have been said today, and some stories I've heard before, some that were new. Getting to hear from his father, his best friend, all the stories shared between us is amazing. Personally, for me, the impact that Stephan had on my life is you don't realize it, until you reflect and you think back, and then you realize maybe I'm doing some things because this is what shaped these moments. To go back to that night, that changed everything, right? It changed the lives of everybody up here on the stage, a lot of people in the room, and a lot of people across the globe. That night had such an impact, and you can't even really sense of how many people it impacted when you think back, because at that time, a fight like that, it really hadn't been seen before. That was stuff that you saw in movies. And the new people, the new eyes on the sport that were watching that night, I mean, it changed the lives and it had an impact. And ultimately, that's what your judge is. What's your legacy as a man? What impact? How have you helped people? And for Stephan, it was that warrior spirit. He defined that warrior spirit. There were people watching that fight, not only in their living rooms, but these guys behind me in the dressing rooms being like, I can't believe that this is possible. I can't believe the body can do that. I can't believe somebody's will to win can take you to these levels. And when you take that and you can put it not only into your athletic career, being like, man, I didn't think the 4-minute mile was possible, and then it happened. And I didn't think the body could do that, and then you saw Forrest and Stephan do that. You take it into your personal life that I'm not quitting. He showed me this is possible. You take it into business, whatever it is. I think it was Tom was telling the story of Robert Downey Jr. saying the same thing, right? Like, you impacted my life. So to think of how many lives he impacted for the better and gave people confidence, strength, the will to believe is, it really hit me, and that's what I wanted to express here today. It's changed my life. It's given me motivation. It's set a standard that ultimately can't be reached, but you're still going to try every day. And that's what Stephan means to me. He's the ultimate warrior spirit. With that being said, again, deepest heartfelt condolences to the Bonnar family and friends, everybody here. Thank you for coming out today and letting us share these moments. I'm forever honored and humbled to call Stephan a friend. Thank you.
On behalf of Stephan's friends and family, I want to thank you all very much for spending this time with us and coming to honor his memory. And I want to leave you with this. Despite the moniker, the American Psycho, Stephan was an incredibly kind and loving person. If you want to do something in honor of him, to remember him, please just remember that if somebody like Stephan Bonnar can be taken from us so young, a person that I always described as durable, a person who in all of his many UFC fights and all of his many fights against world champions never got knocked out, if his life isn't guaranteed, then the time we have on this earth is not guaranteed at all. And I think he would want me to tell you to spend the time you have and the rest of your life loving the people close to you. Thank you all very much for coming.